Hello and welcome back to the FSF Podcast. I am Tim. I am your host, and this is a show that is made by nerds for nerds. So today, our guest in the Nerdatorium is a really cool actor, but he's evolved to working behind the camera as well as a producer, a director, a co-host of the Delta Flyers podcast, and he is, you may best know him for his role on Star Trek Voyager, of course, as Tom Paris, which he did for about, I think, 165 or 170 episodes, somewhere in that neck of the woods. But since that time, he's directed some of the best television shows that you have loved to watch on programs like Blue Bloods, which I love, Dawson's Creek, Supernatural, The Mentalist, The Orville, and, of course, Resident Alien. And that's just to name a few. His IMDb page is full of really cool projects and things that he's been a part of, and we're going to talk to him a little bit about that tonight. So we're going to discuss his origin story, the evolution into directing, the importance of both Star Trek and Resident Alien to him personally and professionally, and we'll slide in a couple other fun questions in there as well. But please help me welcome Robert McNeill to the FSF Podcast. Welcome to the show, Robert.
Hello. What a nice introduction. Thank you.
Well, I tried every once in a while. My favorite is when I'm interviewing somebody and I happen to stumble across their website or their IMDb page, and it's clear that they've had a really smart PR person write it for them. And I'm like, I'm just going to steal that. And
I've done that before.
Yeah, I just, and I always admit it right in the introduction. I'm like, yeah, I can't write this good, so I'm just going to steal their introduction and we're going to go with it.
Yeah.
It's been kind of entertaining at times.
Well, it was good. You covered a
you.
lot there. You covered
Yay,
a lot.
me. All right. So, Robert, one of the first questions I always love to ask every one of my guests, I shouldn't say anyone, but every one of my guests, unless they've been on the show previously, and then this is a moot point. But I always like to talk about their origin story first off, and right out of the gate. And I do this for a couple reasons. Number one, I love to know what makes people tick, why they do what they do. Why do they get involved in the career that they had, the projects that they had? Why do they choose what they were doing? And secondly, I'm a massive nerd, and nerds love a good origin story. So in the story of Robert McNeill, what was the deciding factor for you want to be getting involved in the entertainment industry?
Yeah, it's I've told this story before, so I'll try to tell it new and differently here. But
okay,
I didn't grow up in any sort of showbiz family. I mean, far, far from it. My grandfather was a big rig mechanic. He worked on. He was a shop foreman in a little town called Rockingham, North Carolina, that's most known for its racetrack. Mm-hmm. It's NASCAR track in Rockingham. But yeah, I came from a family of country people in North Carolina mostly. My father grew up in Rockingham. My mother grew up in a little town called Cary, North Carolina, and they were, I would say, working class, lower middle class, rural people, really. And so there was nobody in show business. There was no, theater or film or TV or anything. I had one great aunt named Aunt Esther, and she was my grandfather's sister, and she taught piano in this little town, Wagram, North Carolina. And she was a very creative and interesting, fascinating person to me, and I always loved her. And she taught me when I was young. This is the very beginnings of like the first time I can remember thinking about people could be creative. It just wasn't something my family was into. We didn't, talk about books or art or Shakespeare or any of that. None of that. That was another planet. It was another world. It just never came into my orbit. Anyway, my Aunt Esther taught piano in the little town. And once I went down to stay with family, and she took me on this little trip to go see a museum of one of our relatives who was the poet laureate of North Carolina and was a painter and a poet. And his little town in the middle of nowhere outside of Wagram, North Carolina, or maybe it was Hamlet, one of these little towns, they had turned his house into a museum, and it was, maybe open for 3 hours on Saturday. It wasn't like a
Right.
popular museum, but it was a historical site. And I remember when my Aunt Esther took me, I must have been like 10 years old or something. And I remember just thinking, how is that possible? Like, boy, that's different than anybody else that are farmers. My great granddad was a farmer. He had a watermelon farm and cantaloupes. And I used to go pick watermelon and take them back and sell them in front of his house on the street, for $1 each or something. They were farmers. They were country people. And so, yeah, to me, that blew my mind. That's the first time I can remember thinking anything in a creative sort of field other than farming, being a mechanic, that kind of labor, working class. Anyway, also I moved around a lot as a kid. My dad worked for GE. He was in computers, but he was a company guy. He'd gone to engineering school, got hired by GE right out of college, and he got transferred every other year. So we were, in outside of DC and Rockville, Maryland, and then we were up in Philly, and then we were in North Carolina for a while. We were back up to Maryland and Gaithersburg. It was just like every other year, it felt like we were moving. And around 6th, 7th grade, we ended up in Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I think of as home. And we had moved a lot. And so I had become a bit of a very shy kid, very quiet, didn't have a lot of friends. I wasn't social at all. And my mom, when we first moved to Atlanta, put my little sister into ballet and, what 3-year-old ballet class kids do. And she came home one day and she said, hey, they had a flyer up at that little dance studio. They're doing a children's production of The Wizard of Oz, and they need a bunch of munchkins. And maybe you could meet some kids there. And I had never thought about doing a play or anything, but I was like, sure, yeah, whatever. She didn't push me, but she was like, it'd be great. You'd meet a lot of kids. And it's right down the street, this little place. And I didn't have any real hobbies per se. I like to go play in the woods and, fall in the creek and stuff like that. I was a quiet kid. Anyway, I ended up doing The Wizard of Oz. I ended up being a munchkin. And then I got upgraded to Uncle Henry because the kid dropped out and they moved me up. And suddenly I did experience with the children's theater, getting to know a lot of kids and this sort of a certain sense of like belonging. And it's what people often find on sports, being part of a team or being connected, that team thing, camaraderie. And, you're all working on the same thing. I just happened to stumble into The Wizard of Oz and being a munchkin. And that's how, and it was the first time I felt like, oh, this feels like I'm connected, like I belong, like I matter. And so I just got totally addicted to that. I was like, I want to do more of that. I want to do that. Are they doing another play? Yeah, I really did. I wanted to do another play. And so they only did these plays once a year, but I got involved in like their kids' drama classes and did some of that stuff. And then in the summer they had a theater camp and I did that. And then I did the next year, I did another play. And anyway, it just kind of, that's the origin story. To me, it comes down to, I think that I was sort of, because of my life experience, feeling a bit lost and feeling we'd moved a lot. We had, I just didn't know where I fit in. And sports, I did sports. I played baseball. I played a little football when I was younger, very young. But by the time I got into the theater, it just felt different. And I've said this once before that because I had gotten quieter and quieter and become kind of a shy kid, I don't think that in my family there was a lot of emotional intelligence. Like we didn't talk about feelings. We didn't talk about, which is a common experience. A lot of people have families like that. And for me, the theater, because you've got a script in front of you and you've got a story and the character says how they feel. And then they go through challenges and they have lines and then they usually, when you're a kid, you're doing plays where there's a happy ending. And so for me, it was like almost like therapy doing theater, because I was able to, like, in my body, I got to pretend like I had that emotional intelligence that I don't think I had developed because of
Okay.
the way my family was, because of moving, all those things. And so it sort of taught me how to express myself and how to, because I got to practice it. I had lines. Just say what the lines are. I didn't know how to do that in life yet, but just say the lines and you'll know what it feels like to be in a romantic experience with someone, or say the lines and you'll know what it feels like to be in an argument where where it doesn't explode like it might have in my family, where the argument gets resolved, stuff like that. Like, that was what attracted me to theater, and TV and film never occurred to me back then. Like, just like my farmer family and any of this step never occurred to me. Once I discovered theater, I was like, oh, I get that. And then as I did more theater, a lot of theater through high school, local theater, some local professional theater, I started thinking, oh, maybe I can be a theater actor. Maybe that could be my career. So that's what I went to do. Even when I went to be a theater actor, being on TV shows or any of that, going to California, to Hollywood, none of that.
Sure.
It literally didn't occur to me until, well into being in New York and trying to be a theater actor.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There's my origin story. There you go.
I like it. It's a good origin story.
Thank you.
Do you think that, and I'm just asking this because the one of the similarities between your upbringing and mine is I've also moved a lot for vastly different reasons. My natural father was an abusive alcoholic with my mother, and so we were constantly moving.
Yeah. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, well, it is what it is.
Everybody's got their stuff, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's got something.
There's always baggage back there somewhere.
Exactly.
But hey, my mom married a good man when I was about 9 years old. I have his last name now and not my birth last name, and that's my dad. So
yeah.
But
well, it's funny you say that, because Terry Farrell, who was on Deep Space Nine, played Dax. She's now a co-host with us on our podcast, The Delta Flyers, our Star Trek podcast. And Terry's been on, and she's talked about that, how her natural father was not a part of her life growing up, and her stepfather, and when she was a teenager and starting to model, she had to pick a professional name. And she was like, oh, I have a chance to honor my stepfather because he's my dad.
Yeah.
And so Farrell is her stepfather's last name.
It's that's cool.
Her. Yeah. She took that.
Bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, he adopted me when I was 13, but up until that point, like we had moved around a lot, went to a bunch of different public school systems. And did you find that moving, I find that moving around that much does one of two things for a young kid. It either makes them an introvert and they kind of recede back into themselves, or they become some form of a version of an extrovert. Which was me. I got to the point where I was going and trying to be, I always tell people I'm an extrovert up until the point that I'm not.
Right.
And then, we wipe the slate clean and we move forward. But how do you think that affected you moving around a lot?
I think in those years of, pre-adolescence and early adolescence, I was shrinking. Okay. And I think that if I had not found that children's theater in The Wizard of Oz, I'm not sure how that would have manifest, like how that would have gotten resolved.
Okay.
I don't know. Because I really, I don't think it was bringing out extroverted qualities. I think the theater really, for me, and the idea of being an actor and all that, for me, really was critical. And I remember, when I was later in high school, when I was thinking about going to college for, going to school for acting and being an actor. And I remember my mentor, Linda Wise was her name. She's passed away now. She was a high school teacher and a local theater director and a wonderful theatrical personality. She was a big deal and sent a lot of people off to Broadway and theater careers and creative careers. She was just wonderful. But Linda said to me, she said, I said, I think I'm going to try to be an actor. And she said, all I can say is if you can imagine yourself doing anything else and being happy, then I think you should do that. But if
Right.
you can't, if you cannot imagine your life without being an actor, that's how committed you have to be. You have to be 150 per 200%, what 1,000%.
You
It
got to
just
be
can't
all
be
in.
an option. You've got to be all in, because she said the odds are it's going to be a tough life being an actor. And she was right. She was absolutely right.
Okay.
And I was one of the lucky ones. There's a lot of very talented
Oh,
people
sure.
I've known throughout my career, um, who I thought were incredibly talented people, but never had a break to have an easy life. They always had a hard life trying to make it happen for whatever reason. They just didn't have the opportunity, the luck,
Hmm.
the timing, all that.
Yeah. I look at acting much the same as I do with musicians who are trying to cut it and trying to break it.
Yeah.
They slog, they put in the work, they're doing all the stuff behind the scenes, and they could be immensely talented, but for whatever
Mhm.
reason, it just hasn't cracked for them just yet.
Yeah.
And I see a lot of actors that, you know, um, in plays and different theater productions and things where you're like, boy, they're really good.
Yeah.
That person's really talented, and they may be just pristinely happy in that position doing the things that they're doing, but
Yeah.
you also think, boy, why isn't somebody like that, why haven't they cut it big yet? But
Yeah.
that's kind of one of those thoughts there.
Well, I'm still very close with one of my childhood friends that I met in this children's theater. His name's Harry Christian. He lives in New Jersey. And he has continued. I'm 61. He's a
Hmm.
year or two older than me. But Harry has carved out a life in this little town in New Jersey, in this little theater that started as a community theater where he didn't make money doing it. And between odd jobs and things, he was able to put it
Hmm.
together. But he's a member of this company that's now a professional company, and they have equity contracts.
Oh, that's
And
cool.
he's made a life there in this creative community that's very small in this small town in New Jersey, and he loves it. And he's got a very successful life. He teaches some, he does this and that, and puts it all together. And I wouldn't hold the same standard to everyone that you have to be on a TV show, you have to be on a Star Trek show to have a
Right. Yeah.
successful career. You don't have to. You
No.
can, my friend Harry I admire what he does. Last month, he just did this original play. He was telling me about it, that the company member had written. And he told me about this play. And I was like, that sounds so creative and fascinating. Good for you. How lucky
Yeah.
you are to be able to do this.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm happy with my career. I'm happy with the things I've been able to do when I was an actor, now as a director and producer and writer. But I don't think everyone has to achieve the same standard
Oh,
to
agreed. Yeah.
feel successful. You know what I mean?
I often tell people that if you can get paid for doing something you love, you're already winning.
Yeah.
Whether that's $50 or $50,000, whatever it is, if you're
Yeah.
getting paid to do something that you enjoy, you're winning.
Yeah.
You know,
I
and
agree.
and I think that's a very key thing in life. So,
Yeah.
all right, well let's transition here a little bit. Now we've talked about your origin story. We've talked about how you got into acting and all those things. But as you progressed in your stuff where you were in front of the camera doing your acting, you also started doing some directing as well, including some episodes of Star Trek Voyager. How did you find that acting or directing rather scratches maybe that artistic itch in a way that acting does not?
I think for me, I enjoyed being in the theater. I really loved doing plays because as an actor on stage, you're telling the story from beginning to end. You're in control.
Mm-hmm.
That job of the character you're playing is part of the storytelling, and every night is different. Every show is different. Whereas when I got behind the camera, when I got in front of the camera as an actor, I realized, oh, I'm not in control of this at all. It's not like the theater. We do a bunch of takes, they edit it together. They can make me look like they use my best take, or they can be, cutting to the other person the whole scene, and you missed all the stuff I was doing. And I was like, I'm not in control of this at all.
No.
I would, excuse me, I would walk in for a rehearsal for a scene as an actor, and the director already had the shots planned, and he already had the blocking plan. And he said, you're going to come in there, you're going to sit, don't say that line until you move over here. And I was like, wow, I'm not really a part, like in the theater, you're a part of that, evolving that blocking and the staging and the moments, and there's time in rehearsal. But in television, it's too fast. You gotta, they tell you where to stand and where to say what. And anyway, so I think it was that sense of like, whoa, I'm not in control of this. I don't feel as confident, I'm not enjoying it. I got to the place where I wasn't enjoying being in front of the camera as much. It wasn't fun anymore. It felt like, oh, I'm just a puppet in this bigger picture. And I started looking at the people behind the camera, the set design, the production designers, the cameramen, the director of photography, the director, the writers, all these people, the producers. Like, what are they doing? Because they seem to be pulling all the strings. I'm literally the last one to get all the information. And I found that what they were doing was really interesting to me and very creative. And so that's why I started looking at the people behind the scenes and all the things they did. And I found that to be more challenging for me. Yeah.
I think that's a great answer, because I think for somebody who hasn't, obviously I haven't been on a set, I wouldn't know what that feels like. But I can see your point, where if you want to have an artistic vision laid out, maybe as an actor, that's maybe not the spot that's going to give that to you.
Yeah, it's ironic because, now having directed and produced for a long time, I really hold the actor's role in high esteem. Like, if we don't have a great performance that moves people moment to moment, scene to scene, nobody's going to watch. I don't care how cool the shots are. I don't care how great that set is that you built, or the visual effects you're doing. If the actor is not bringing humanity and real human moments, moment to moment, like, the actor's role is very, very valuable. But I still think, as a director and a producer, it's often in service of the people who are more in control of the big picture, and that's the writer, the director, the producer, the editor, all those people. We can manipulate. I remember, here's a great example. I remember an editor friend of mine once, when the reality show Survivor first came on the air.
Oh, yeah.
The very first season, they had shot it and they had edited it. That's funny. They edited the show, and they weren't happy. They were like, this is not exciting. And so they called my friend Greg, who's a wonderful editor, had been a wonderful editor, and they said, take a look at these cuts and tell me what, and some of this stuff. Take a look at it. Take a swing at this, because it's not. We want this to be exciting, and it's just boring.
Okay.
And he looked at it and he said, you're just showing what really happened. You're just editing what really happened. He said, you need to think of this like a scripted. He was an editor of scripted shows. He said, you need to think of this like a scripted show. Who's the bad guy? Who's the villain? He said, you can have someone talking or doing something in Survivor, but you can cut over to someone reacting and take a reaction from another scene or another, game. And you can create a whole story that didn't really happen by the way you edit Survivor. And they were like, their minds were blown. They were like, oh my God, we can take pieces from, day 10 and put it on day 1, and, already start setting up dynamics between these people that didn't exist. So that's a great example. They went in, and now we know, Survivor was one of the first big reality shows.
Right.
Because, and Greg, my friend, Greg Prange, who's also producer and director now, became that. But he gave them that advice of rearrange everything like a scripted show, and set up your relationships, set up your romances, set up your villains, start to lead them towards, they think somebody's gonna win, but then the other guy wins. And if you just show what really happened, it's kind of boring. It's like normal life. So don't do that. Make up a story. That to me shows the power of the people behind the scenes. Is that,
Yeah.
As an actor, I can give a great performance, but if they want to edit it a different way, they can tell a whole different story. And often,
for sure, yeah.
Often we do, even in scripted shows. Often we do.
I believe
we take what happened and kind of we manipulate it in a way that hopefully is in line with the story we're trying to tell.
Yeah.
Even more than what the actor did.
So reimagine it through an alternative lens. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I get that. Okay. So you have also been very involved in the story and the production, obviously, of the Resident Alien series as executive producer and director. I'm curious to know, what was it about this series in particular that made you want to work on this show? What about Resident Alien grabbed your attention?
Well, to answer that, I'd have to go back to another show I did called Chuck. I did for 5 years on NBC. And Chuck was, the pilot was directed by Mick G. I'd worked with Mick G a couple of times before that, but didn't know him well and his company well. But when I heard the description of Chuck, which is a nerdy guy that works in like a Best Buy, on our show it was called Buy More, a nerdy guy who's kind of lost in the pilot, gets a computer put in, a super secret government computer put inside his brain. And now he's got to be used as an asset for the CIA and special ops. And he's got to save the world because he's got this computer in his head. And it's going to have comedy. It's going to have action. It's going to have a big heart. And I was like, I'm in. That's my show. Mm-hmm. I love to do action. It's exciting as a filmmaker and as a storyteller and as just somebody who likes the equipment and the cool stuff of filmmaking. Action is great. It's so fun. I love comedy because I like comedy in life. I like to spend time on a set. We work long hours, and I'd rather be around people that are laughing and we're trying to make other people laugh. And it's a better way to spend my 15-hour days. Or whatever they end up. Whereas dramas and dark stories and, things about murder and the horrible side of humanity, you feel that on set,
Yeah.
So Chuck was the perfect show for me. And I thought, and it ended up 5 years we did that show. It ended up being one of my favorite experiences of producing and directing and being a part of that team. And so anyway, cut to, I'm going to answer your question now. Cut to 2018 or 2019 maybe. And I had just a show I was doing called The Gifted. It was an X-Men show. I had just gotten canceled. And I was waiting to see what the next thing is. And I happened to read somewhere online that this show called Resident Alien had just been picked up by Sci-Fi Channel. And it was based on a comic book about an alien who comes to kill all the humans, but he learns to love them. And it's got comedy and sci-fi and action, and it's based on a comic book. And I read this online and I was like, that sounds like a show I would love. It sounds like Chuck. It sounds like it's got all that. It's got action and sci-fi. It's got heart. It's got comedy. So I called my agent and I said, hey, do they have a producer for this yet? And he said, well, they're talking to somebody. It looks like they've already got somebody. I said, okay, well, let me know. It sounds like a perfect show for me. I'd love to meet him. And a month or two goes by, or a month or so goes by. Anyway, and I'm going to LA. I don't live in LA anymore, but I was flying into LA for a meeting on another show to produce that I didn't want to produce, but I was going to go meet him anyway. And I got off and I called my agent that morning. I said, okay, I'm going to this meeting. I said, by the way, whatever happened to that comic book show, the Resident Alien thing? Did they hire that guy? And he goes, I don't know. Let me check. I'll call you after your meeting. And he called me after the meeting. He goes, no, they haven't hired that guy yet. They're still dancing around. I think there's maybe some issues. They'd love to meet you. You're in town today. Why don't you go meet him for a drink tonight? and I'll send you the script. So he
How
sent me
cool
the
is that?
script. I read it that afternoon. Went and had drinks with some of the studio people, not Chris, who created the show yet. And we had a great meeting. And they said, "You've got to meet Chris. You got to meet Chris." And so, anyway, yeah, that's how it happened. So I kept on him about it, my agent and everything. And then luckily they hadn't hired this other guy. I know the other guy. He's a wonderful producer and director, and he would have
Hmm.
been wonderful. But I think he had young kids. He didn't want to go to Vancouver for all those months. And my
Sure.
kids, my kids were old and so and grown and on their own. So I didn't have that worry. So I was
Ah,
like, had a
yeah.
great meeting, went to Vancouver, worked with Alan Tudyk. He did a brilliant job on Resident
Oh, for
Alien.
sure. Yeah.
Chris Sheridan's a wonderful creative partner and showrunner. And I got to write on that show. I got to direct. I got to produce all the episodes. It was great. It was a great show. I loved
Yeah.
it.
It's I've told people when I've talked about this show to other people, they're like, "Oh, what show do what shows are you watching that you really enjoy?" I'm like, "Well, I know I said it just wrapped up, but I really enjoyed Resident Alien. It's one of the few shows on television where I actually laughed out loud
No,
at at
good.
just at different things, and I love, I've had a couple of the cast members on the show, and I've talked with both Sarah Tomko and Sarah Podemsky, and
Hmm.
had a great time with each one of them, and getting to know them a little bit, and I love the strength of the cast that's on that show. It's
Yeah.
so well casted, and of course, having Alan Tudyk, it doesn't hurt anything whatsoever. That's Alan's a genius in my book.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure that guy's winning at life. If you can get paid to sound like a chicken in a Disney movie, you're doing something right.
Yes, you are.
But how did you find that working with a cast like that, with strength of a cast, how does that affect the way that you direct?
Well, it's interesting because that cast had Alan Tudyk, who's done, 10,000 different
Hmm.
kinds of things, from theater to big feature, movies, to TV shows, to big TV shows, weird little obscure TV shows. He's done, all kinds of things, big movies. So he's a veteran, and I would say the rest of the cast were pretty much rookies in a lot of ways. They had
Hmm.
not had that kind of experience on a TV show. Corey Reynolds had done a series for a while, and he'd been on Broadway. So Corey was the other experienced actor, but most of the other cast members were fresh faces to TV, and certainly they had done a lot of other things with their, developing their careers, theater and indie films and things like that. But they were kind of new to this kind of TV show. So it was a very interesting balance to give Alan what he needed as a veteran and a professional, and give
Hmm.
him the space and respect to let him do his thing in the way that he was used to doing it, having done so much work, and to support these newer actors who didn't have as much experience about
Yeah.
just the mechanics sometimes of how a day goes, and how a rehearsal and just all of that is very different than theater. I mean, we talked about my experience in the theater. It was very different for me going to TV as an actor. So very different for a lot of these theaters, like Sarah Tomko. Sarah Podemsky had done a lot of stuff.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it was. They were all beautifully cast. I said that to Chris so many times. The same thing. Like, wow, did you get lucky? This feels like an unusually authentic cast for television. I've
Yeah.
done so many TV shows where the conversations are about things that are very, surfacey and shallow, um, and feel like we're just hiring the same types over and over again. These felt like real three-dimensional, unusual faces, unusual acting styles, unusual characters. They just were. They all of them. They felt very um, interesting and different and fresh. And so it was great. It was great. But it was definitely challenging sometimes to, uh, find the right language for all of them. Because just like any show, whether it's Resident Alien or whether an actor has a ton of experience or not as much experience, every actor is always very different in what they need. They
Sure.
all need 100% of your support in whatever way they need it. So, yeah, it was, but it was great. It was a real tight cast. They were super close. The whole crew was super close. I remember after the pandemic, a lot of people were really needed to work, but a lot
Yeah.
of our crew stuck around and turned down other jobs just to come back on to Resident Alien because they said it was the best job they ever had. They
Oh,
had
that's
so
cool.
much fun. Yeah, it was great.
That's awesome. All right. So the white elephant in the room is the one major project we haven't talked about yet. So we're just going to talk about this for a moment. And that's Star Trek, because that's such a major franchise, adored by millions worldwide. Now, your character in Star Trek on Voyager, of course, Tom Paris, beloved by so
Yes.
many. What parts of Tom's character did you identify with to help bring him to life? Is there something where you look at Tom and you go, yeah, that was a part of his personality I really wanted to explore?
I think initially when I first came on Voyager, I didn't relate to Tom very well, to be honest. They wrote this sort of like chip on his shoulder,
Sure.
smart ass, cocky. I mean, at the time when I got Voyager, I had some great opportunities, even at a young age. All through my 20s,
Mm-hmm.
I had done some movies, I had done some other TV shows, I had been on a soap opera, I'd been on Broadway, I'd done tours, big national tours of plays. I'd had a lot of experience, but at the time when Voyager happened, I had sort of hit a low point. I was questioning whether I was going to keep trying to be an actor. I was 29
Okay.
years old. I just had my second kid. I didn't have the kid, but my wife at the time.
I understand what you mean.
Yes, yeah. And I was just kind of, I didn't have a lot of confidence. So Tom Paris being this confident, cocky, chip on his shoulder, that's not where I was in my life. I was the polar opposite of that, to be quite frank. I was really questioning whether I wanted to do that anymore, be an actor. But I knew when they called about Star Trek, I was like, I had been on Next Generation. I'd done a guest spot as Nick Locarno. I knew what that company was like. I knew what the security of a Star Trek show could be.
Yeah.
And I just had my second kid, like I said. So I was like, that could really help, 7 years on a show. If it's like all the others so far, it could be a great opportunity. So I really wanted to get that job. And so I didn't identify with a lot of those qualities. The way that they wrote him, I didn't like. The womanizing thing, I never liked. They were really heavy-handed with that the first season or so.
Yeah.
It just felt very unflattering, a lot of ways that they wrote that character that first year. And it didn't feel like me. And I remember talking to them a lot about that. And, I wouldn't call myself like, I'm not a guy who tells jokes. I'm not that kind of comedy guy. I'm not a punchline guy, but I'm an observational life comedy person. I like to make funny observations about things in life. I like to have a sense of humor about life.
Sure.
And I was like, please, like, this guy needs a sense of humor. He needs to be a fun guy. Like, he needs to. And so they started writing a little more of that, I would say, by season 2 and 3 and 4. And as we slid into the middle part of that series, I think they found a character that I identified with a lot more.
Okay.
His sense of humor, his sort of observations about everything were a little lighter and funnier. I think we saw some vulnerabilities in him and where he lacked confidence, and where we realized, oh, that's all just a cover. And I think that he became a much more three-dimensional character. I mean, I've always said a lot of times in Star Trek, the heroes that come on are a bit two-dimensional. They can, they put them in a box and they just want them to keep playing that box every year, every episode. Tom I think on Voyager, a lot of our characters evolved, but I would say that I'm grateful that I think Tom evolved more than most any character I can think of, from
Yeah.
going from the kind of person he was in the beginning to where he ended up by the end. To me, I'm grateful that he got to have that kind of three-dimensional change, and the relationship with B'Elanna I thought was incredible. Star Trek doesn't always do great relationships, and that one was really good. And I
Hmm.
give a lot of credit to Roxanne Dawson, who's also become a director now. But she and we took that relationship and those scenes and stories really seriously, and we really respected each other's characters and the character arcs they were going through. We didn't judge those character arcs. We
Okay.
didn't, we were, yeah, I think it was a good matchup.
Nice. Yeah. Everything in doing research for this interview, I was looking at, I went out and just kind of see what people were saying about Tom Paris. And I think one of the things that I saw more often than not was people were commenting on just what you talked about, was the development of his character arc over the seasons, and
Yeah.
how he
Yeah.
became a more relatable character, and he became somebody who had a level of interest in him, not just another cocky flyboy.
Yeah.
There was something to him. There was some substance that was given to him in later seasons, where people felt like they could attach to him. And I think that's probably I think one of the better compliments you can give a character is that you get
Yeah.
to see their development, and you get to see that arc from whatever they started at to be this better, like you said, a
Yeah.
three-dimensional character. So
Yeah. 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 I was, by the end of the series, I was really happy with the whole scope of that character.
yeah.
But I
Okay.
think, if you jump in at just the beginning, I didn't like him either. I'm not surprised the audience didn't like him. I didn't particularly like it. But I also, as I said to you, I had come into Voyager really questioning whether I wanted to continue acting. And that's why the
Hmm.
directing became my focus during Voyager. So I was just, my strategy was just be a good company guy. Like, whatever they write, don't complain, don't give them notes, don't tell them, you don't like things. Like, just be a good soldier, show up, and they'll give you an episode at some point, and you'll get to, and that'll be how I kind of take a new path.
Right.
And so I in hindsight, I wish I had done both. I wish I had been a little more outspoken about
Hmm.
the things I didn't like about the character. I wasn't. I did whatever they wrote. I did it. I tried to do it how they wanted, even if I disagreed. And
Sure.
I think some other actors, like Bob Picardo, was the doctor on the show. I think Bob took a different strategy. Instead of being a company guy, he was a company guy, but he was also like always telling them, what else he could do? He could do this. The doctor, the hologram could be like this. And I think that strategy was really helpful because he did evolve his character.
Yeah.
He owned that evolution in a way that I let the writers discover the things that needed to change, rather than me going and saying, I think this, or trying to do that part of the process. So.
Yeah, but I can appreciate that as well. Like you said, you were 29. You and your wife just had your second child. You were trying to make sure that you had a stable career.
Yeah, I just didn't want to rock the boat.
Yeah, I appreciate that very much. It reminds me of we had John Billingsley on a while back, and John was talking about when he got the call to become on Enterprise.
Yeah.
And he calling his wife and Bonnie, and he's like, honey, our lives just changed.
Yeah.
Which I love John. He's the
oh, he's awesome.
He's just he's the loose screw in the best way possible.
Yes, he is.
And I love that man. He's a hoot.
He's a hoot and a big heart and a good,
tremendous.
Like,
yeah.
he he walks the walk about everything he says.
Yeah. Yeah. If he says it, it's real. So
yeah.
All right. So I asked you that question in the beginning, Robert, about your origin story, and I explained to you why I asked that question. I have another question now that I'd like to ask you, and it's along the same lines. Now, that's how you got started, but this is more about who you are and what you are today. And I call this question suggestion time. So what I'm curious is what are you reading or listening to now that you think that everybody else should be listening to or reading?
I am listening to a podcast that I've actually listened to it for a while, but she stopped doing it for a while and is doing it again. The podcast host is Danny. What is her name? Danny. I just spaced on it. I had it in my head, and as soon as I said her first name, I spaced. Anyway, the podcast is called Family Secrets.
Okay.
And Danny Shapiro. And she started this podcast because she grew up in a very Jewish family, but she was the blonde daughter and always felt like a little different, but very close family, very tight.
Okay.
Cut to, she's in her 50s. She's a professor of writing. She's written novels. She's very successful. Her parents both have recently died. And her husband says, she's in her 50s. Her husband says, hey, let's do one of those DNA tests, the 23andMe or something. Let's see, our roots. And they do it. And she realizes that she has none of the markers of her family, that she's not biologically connected to her family. And she realized that was a family secret. Long story short, that her parents did IVF with a donor egg and sperm, and she's not the biological child of her parents, who she always thought, and they never told her this. It was a family secret. And just how her world, and her
that would be
big. And she, her parents are gone. She can't have any questions answered. And so she just kind of, had to imagine and had to uncover some of this, and who knew. And so she started a podcast called Family Secrets about other people who have significant secrets in their, in their families that then they talk about. I think she describes it as the known unknown. It's that thing in a family where there's more to something, but no one ever talks about it.
Yeah.
And I love this podcast because all of these stories, I think, my family growing up, those issues were there. Big or little secrets, doesn't matter.
Sure.
It's the known unknown experience. It's that feeling of no one's talking about this. And she interviews a lot of people with great stories, and it's just very authentic and honest and human. So I highly recommend Family Secrets.
All right. Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Robert, we have entered the section of the show where I need to ask you a silly question.
Aha.
And it's really not all that silly, to be honest with you. But the story behind this is that one of our team members here at the FSF podcast, Kathleen, was out with her daughter one day, and somebody asked her daughter this question.
Yeah.
And Kathleen was like, well, how rude. You could have asked me this question too. You shouldn't age out of this question. And so this question comes from Kathleen. And that is, Robert McNeill.
Yes.
What's your favorite dinosaur?
Oh, wow. I was just thinking about, do you remember the animated film Land Before Time?
Yeah, I saw that it just turned 30 and it reminded me to take Advil.
Well, I was just thinking about that. I was thinking how cute the little Brontosaurus dinosaur.
Littlefoot.
So, yeah, Littlefoot. So I think I would say my favorite dinosaur. I was just thinking about that today, actually. That's weird that you bring up dinosaurs twice in one day. They've come up. Yeah, Littlefoot. I think I would go with a baby Brontosaurus is my favorite dinosaur.
I think we've had a Brontosaurus before, but I don't think we've ever had anyone specify baby Brontosaurus. So you are an original
thank you.
In that direction. So very cool.
You.
All right.
All right.
Very good. Oh, Robert, thank you so much for being on the show today. Where can our listeners go to find out more about you, your work, anything that's coming up?
Well, the best place to go if you want to hear me ramble on more is the Delta Flyers podcast.
Absolutely, yeah.
Garrett Wong and I started that in 2020, spring of 2021. I don't remember. It's all a blur now. It was the pandemic. And spring of 2020 must have been. And and we started the Delta Flyers podcast to talk about Voyager. And we thought, well, we'll see if anybody listens to this thing. And it has just exploded. It's a phenomenal podcast. We went through all the episodes of Voyager. We put out a recap podcast for free to everybody that goes out on any podcast platform. You can listen to recaps and discussions about every episode of Voyager. Those are out there. We then, when we finished Voyager, we had so many people loving this podcast that we decided to do Deep Space Nine. We brought in Armin Shimmerman and Terry Farrell. And so we recapped those episodes. But beyond the recaps and the podcast that goes out, there's a Patreon that has all kinds of deep dives behind it where we do
very cool
deep interviews and bonus materials. And I had cocktail videos, and there's all kinds of things in there. So Patreon is great. Patreon.com/Delta Flyers or something is the Patreon, all the community, and it's phenomenal. I mean, now I go to conventions and Delta Flyers fans and patrons are getting together. They've met each other online, and
that's cool.
We had at the Las Vegas convention, we probably had 40 or 50 Delta Flyers all trying to have a lunch together with all these listeners and everybody. We took over like an entire restaurant practically. And these people know each other through our podcast, the Delta Flyers.
Awesome.
And they become friends. We had two people listening that got married. They met each other, ended up falling in love. Stephanie Baker and Mike Goo got married because of the podcast. It's not just a podcast. It's a lifestyle. No, it's a whole community that's really warmed my heart. I love all these people that we've gotten to know and that have gotten involved in it and support it. So it's a great podcast. I mean, if you want to talk about Star Trek episodes, we talk about them for a long time.
There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Well, very cool. I'll make sure to put some links down in the show notes down below so people can check that out. Go find your Patreon page and everything else. Now, guys, if you haven't already, this seems like a great time to remind you that following our show, the FSF Podcast here on YouTube, is the most important thing you can do to ensure that we get more amazing guests like Robert McNeill here today to have these great conversations and find out these cool little tidbits that you probably didn't know about things before, but you do now. And you know that because you followed our show. See how that works out? So please consider following our show. It helps out more than I can ever really tell you. And be sure to check out Robert's work as well, not only as acting and directing. I'll put an IMDb link there so you can see everything that he's worked on and see some of the stuff that's upcoming. But also, you're going to want to check out the Delta Flyers. It is a good podcast. I can concur with that completely. So go check that out. So guys, thank you for listening and or watching. Thank you to Robert McNeill for being on the show today, and may the force be with you as you continue to live long and prosper. Goodbye.
Copyright 2025 FSF Podcast. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Podcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpodcast.com.